the founding of the Forbidden Town. The city of Oju, nestled in the heart of ancient Nigeria, was a marvel to behold, an oasis of gleaming structures, wide, paved streets, and vibrant marketplaces. Its people lived in comfort, relying on mysterious innovations that other towns had only dreamed of. It was a place where the young and ambitious gathered, drawn by its wealth and allure, for it was whispered that anyone who came to Oju could change their fate. Yet, beneath the wonder and progress, a shadow lingered. A law that demanded all residents leave once they turned 30. For most of his life, Obinna hadn't thought much about the rule. It was simply how things were in Oju. Like everyone, he'd grown up watching friends and family disappear once they hit the age limit, escorted out of the city by masked guards to unknown lands. There were no farewells, no promises to write, just a final dinner, a silent procession, and a city that moved on, unflinching. But now that Obinna's 30th birthday was fast approaching, the ancient rule had become personal. Obinna sat on the edge of his balcony that overlooked the bustling streets, deep in thought as he watched children laughing and running around the market stalls. A few years ago, he'd been one of them, carefree and grateful to live in such a prosperous place. Now, the joy had turned sour. It was hard to enjoy a city that would soon spit him out. He was jolted from his thoughts when his best friend, Chijioke, called up from the street below. "Obinna, you look like an old man sitting there in silence. I swear, I'd think you were already over 30 with that frown." Obinna forced a smile, climbing down from the balcony to meet his friend. "I have a week left, Chijioke," he replied as they strolled toward the market. "And I still have no idea what will happen once I leave." Chijioke, who had just turned 27, shrugged casually. "It's the law, Obinna. Everyone leaves when they turn 30. I don't know why you're worried. You'll start a new life somewhere else." "That's easy for you to say," Obinna muttered, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Doesn't it bother you, though? Don't you ever wonder where everyone goes? Why we've never heard from them again?" Chijioke sighed, his gaze dropping. "I do wonder," he admitted, "but questioning the council is dangerous. Oju isn't a place for doubts. It's a place for the young, the bold, the loyal." Their conversation was interrupted as they passed a group of masked guards patrolling the streets, their presence a reminder of the ever-watchful council. Dressed in elaborate robes and carved wooden masks, the guards were silent, their expressions hidden, but their watchful eyes missed nothing. Obinna couldn't resist the urge to question them. As they drew close, he cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir," he called to one of the guards. "Can you tell me what happens after we leave Oju? Where are we sent?" The guard's mask tilted slightly, considering him. "It is forbidden to question the laws of Oju," the guard replied in a deep, measured voice. "Trust the council, young man. They have ensured our prosperity for generations." "But," Obinna started, but the guard lifted a gloved hand, silencing him. "The laws were set by Igwe the Wise, who founded this city and secured our future," the guard continued. "Those who defy his wisdom do so at their own peril." The guard turned away, leaving Obinna and Chijioke in a heavy silence. Chijioke tugged on Obinna's arm, his face pale. "Leave it, Obinna. Do you want them to exile you early?" Obinna let himself be pulled away, but the unease gnawed at him. He felt trapped in a city that was no longer his home. It was as if every stone, every pathway, every building was watching, waiting for him to disappear. That night, unable to sleep, Obinna roamed the city's streets alone. The moon cast a pale light over the rooftops, illuminating details he'd never noticed before. On the walls of the council's chambers, symbols etched into stone glinted under the moonlight. The symbols seemed old, far older than the city itself. As he ran his fingers over them, a shiver ran down his spine, like the city itself was trying to speak. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness, and he turned, startled, to see a figure standing just beyond the shadows. She wore the garb of the masked guards, but her face was bare, her expression calm but wary. It was Adaora, a young guard he recognized from earlier that day. "You're not supposed to be here," she said softly, her voice carrying a mix of warning and something else, curiosity. Obinna swallowed, his pulse quickening. "I have questions, Adaora. Real questions. I want to know why we're exiled at 30 and where the council sends everyone." Adaora hesitated, glancing around before stepping closer. You're not the only one with questions, she murmured, but asking them could get you into trouble. Trouble that might get you thrown out even sooner. I don't care, Obina replied, meeting her gaze. If I'm going to leave, I deserve to know why. Don't you want to know? Adora looked down, her face conflicted. Meet me tomorrow night, she whispered. There's something you should see. And before he could respond, she melted back into the shadows, leaving him alone with only the moonlight and the strange symbols to keep him company. Obina returned to his room, his mind racing with a new sense of purpose. There was something beneath the surface of Oju, something hidden that had driven its founder to create such a harsh law. And he would find it, he would find the truth about his city, even if it meant risking everything. Secrets beneath the surface. The following evening, as twilight cast a warm glow over Oju, Obina made his way toward the abandoned section of the city. This part of Oju, known as the Ajade Quarter, had been closed off for as long as he could remember, its streets overgrown with vines and its stone buildings cracked and dark. Few people ventured there, and the council strictly prohibited entry, claiming it was unsafe and haunted by spirits from another age. But Obina knew that if he wanted answers, he would need to brave the darkness and uncover the secrets hidden in these ruins. As he approached the agreed-upon meeting place, he caught sight of Adaora, standing in the shadows of a crumbling archway. She looked different without her mask and guard uniform, almost vulnerable. She nodded as he approached, her eyes scanning the empty streets. You came, she whispered. Of course, Obina replied, his voice low. I want to know what they're hiding from us. Adaora led him through narrow alleys, the silence around them broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of small creatures. At last, they reached an ancient wooden door, its surface engraved with more of the strange symbols Obina had seen the night before. This door leads to the council's hidden archive, Adaora said, glancing over her shoulder as if she feared they were being watched. This is where they keep records of Oju's founding and the truth about the curse. A curse? A curse? Obina asked, eyebrows raised. This was the first time he had heard such a word associated with Oju. Adora pushed the door open, and the scent of aged wood and dust greeted them as they stepped inside. Shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls and faded parchments. A dim lantern on the wall cast a soft glow, revealing rows of ancient books with titles written in a language Obina could barely decipher. I've only been in here a few times, Adaora murmured, pulling a dusty scroll from one of the shelves and unfurling it. But I've read enough to know that Oju was not always like this. Once, this city was an ordinary village, and Igwe the Wise was just an ordinary man. She handed him the scroll, and Obina read the elegant faded script. To preserve youth is to preserve power. To remain young is to remain in control. To allow age is to invite chaos. The words sent a chill through him. So, that's why they exile us? Adora nodded. Igwe the Wise discovered a ritual that would allow the city to stay youthful and prosperous. But the spell requires a constant flow of young energy. Once someone turns 30, they're no longer useful to the spell. In fact, they become a threat. If the balance is broken, the city would start to age, and Oju's power and prosperity would disappear. Obina let the weight of her words sink in. But where do they go, the ones who turn 30? Adaora's face darkened. That, I don't know. They don't leave willingly. The council ensures that they're taken somewhere, far from here. No one has ever returned to tell us where. Obina clenched his fists. So we're just sacrifices? All of this, the beauty, the riches, the progress, it's all bought with our lives? Adaora nodded. But there's more. She led him to a stack of scrolls in a locked chest. This chest holds records from the council's private meetings. I found it once, and I think it holds the answers we're looking for. With a quick motion, she slipped a hairpin into the lock, jiggling it until the chest clicked open. She pulled out a series of scrolls, scanning through them until she found one marked with a red seal. This one describes the curse and its origins, she said, her voice barely a whisper as she read aloud. In the final hour of Igwe's ritual, the gods demanded a price, a perpetual offering of youth. Igwe agreed, sealing a pact with the earth itself. Oju would grow and prosper, but all who reached the age of 30 would be cast out, exiled to the wilderness where they could no longer disrupt the balance. Obina's heart pounded. This wasn't just an arbitrary rule, it was a pact with the gods themselves. But as Adaora kept reading, her voice trembled. "There's more," she whispered. "It says here, Igwe made one final request of the gods. He wanted a way to enforce the pact, to ensure that no one would defy it." Obina's eyes widened. What did they give him? Adaora held up a sketch that had been folded inside the scroll. It was a drawing of an artifact, a small, dark stone carved with intricate designs. The scroll called it the Stone of Ages. According to the council's records, the artifact bound the spell to the city, locking its youth and prosperity in place. "They keep the stone in the council's inner sanctum," Adaora murmured. "If we could destroy it..." Obina's eyes lit up with a mixture of fear and hope. "If we destroyed it, we'd break the curse, wouldn't we?" Adaora nodded. "But there's a cost. Without the stone's power, Oju would return to what it once was, a village like any other. Its prosperity, its advancements, they'd all vanish." A long silence settled between them as Obina let the implications sink in. The city he had loved, that everyone had loved, was a mirage, a spell sustained by dark magic and blood. As they left the archive, Adaora placed a hand on his arm, her face solemn. "Obina, if we go through with this, we'd be going up against the council and the very foundation of Oju. Are you sure this is what you want?" Obina looked around at the city he had known all his life, the city he'd soon be forced to leave behind. "If I'm going to be exiled, then I want the truth to be known before I go. No one else should have to suffer for this secret." As they slipped back into the shadows, Obina felt a new resolve hardening in his chest. For the first time, he understood the depth of the sacrifice Oju demanded of its people, and he knew that he couldn't leave without challenging the very forces that held the city together. Adaora's eyes met his, filled with both fear and determination. Together, they vowed to uncover the truth about the Stone of Ages and to free Oju from its curse, no matter the cost. The hidden library and a dark revelation. The next night, Obina and Adaora moved through Oju's streets in silence, shadows under the starlit sky. Word had spread quietly among those nearing their 30th birthdays, sparking questions and whispers that moved as discreetly as the moonlight itself. They arrived at the council's chambers, a grand building in the heart of Oju, surrounded by towering stone statues of Igwe the Wise and other legendary figures who had once protected the city. The building's massive iron doors gleamed with intricate carvings, each one a testament to Oju's long history and power. But as Obina pushed the doors open, the statue's watchful eyes felt like silent accusations. Adaora led him down a narrow corridor that descended into darkness. With a cautious glance over her shoulder, she pulled out a small torch, lighting their way down the damp, spiraling stairs. The smell of musty parchment and ancient wood grew stronger as they moved deeper underground. At the base of the stairs lay a door, carved with the same strange symbols they had seen in the Ajade quarter. Adaora took a deep breath, pressing her palm against it, and with a quiet creak, the door opened, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with shelves upon shelves of scrolls, books, and relics from ages past. "This is it," she whispered as they stepped inside the hidden library. "This is where they keep all of Oju's secrets." The air was thick with dust, the silence broken only by the faint rustling of parchment as Obina and Adaora began their search. They pored over records and scrolls, piecing together fragments of the city's past and Igwe's pact with the gods. The texts were written in a blend of languages, some nearly indecipherable, but Adaora had seen enough to guide him to the key documents. After what felt like hours, Adaora held up a particularly worn scroll. "This one. I found it once before, but I didn't understand it fully until now." She spread it on the table, her finger tracing the faded symbols. "This explains why Oju thrives." Obina leaned closer as she read aloud. "Igwe the Wise, having witnessed the fragility of life and the fickle loyalty of the gods, sought a way to secure Oju's future. In his journeys, he discovered a ritual, a means to bind time itself, to create a city forever young, immune to the ravages of age and decay." The scroll went on to describe a powerful ritual that Igwe had performed to achieve his goal. It involved invoking ancient deities and making offerings of youth and vitality. But the gods' price had been high. They demanded that Oju offer a constant tribute of youth, a perpetual sacrifice of life before it ripened. Igwe had accepted, believing the city's success would be worth the price. Adaora continued, her voice trembling slightly. Igwe knew the people would never agree to the pact, so he created the council to enforce it and the guards to protect the secret. He buried the truth here in the depths of Oju, where no one would find it. Obina clenched his fists. All this time, we've been sacrificing ourselves to preserve the wealth and power of a city that was built on a lie. But Adaora wasn't finished. She pulled out another document, this one newer, sealed with the council's red wax. Breaking the seal, she scanned the contents, her face growing paler with every word. This is a record of what happens to those who are exiled, she whispered, handing the document to Obina. They aren't sent to live in another land. They're taken to a place called the Valley of the Forgotten, a wasteland just outside Oju's borders. The council releases them there, far from any other villages. Obina read, his hands shaking as he took in the details. The Valley of the Forgotten was not a safe haven or a place to start anew. It was an abandoned region, a land cursed and barren, where those exiled were left to fend for themselves in a harsh, isolated environment. It was clear that most, if not all, never survived long enough to make it out of the valley. They've been sending our people to die, he said, barely able to speak as the realization sank in. All these years, we've believed we were just leaving to start fresh, but they've been casting us out to our deaths. Adora's face was grim, and it's all to maintain Oju's appearance, its prosperity. They keep the city young and thriving by sacrificing the lives of those who no longer fit the image of youth. But there's more to it. She took a deep breath, holding up the last document they had found. This one was a drawing, a sketch of the Stone of Ages that they had read about in the previous scrolls. The stone was the keystone of the entire ritual, the artifact that bound the city's curse. If the stone were destroyed, the pact would be broken, and Oju would lose its magic. But a warning was written in bold characters beneath the drawing. Destroy the stone, and Oju will return to dust. Obina took a step back, his mind racing. If we destroy the stone, it will break the curse, but it would mean losing everything. Oju would fall apart. Adaora nodded, her expression pained. Yes, without the stone, the spell will unravel, and the city will lose all the power Igwe's ritual brought. Oju would become an ordinary place, no longer the prosperous haven it is now. But people would be free, Obina. No more exiles, no more sacrifices. The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Obina looked around the chamber, at the relics and scrolls that told the story of Oju's rise, and the lives it had destroyed to maintain that rise. We have a choice, Adaora, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We can reveal the truth, destroy the stone, and break the curse. But we'd be giving up everything the city has built. Or we can keep this secret and leave, like the council wants us to. Adaora met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. I'd rather live in an honest village than in a cursed paradise built on lies. Obina nodded slowly. He knew what they had to do, even if it meant losing the city they had both called home. He glanced down at the map Adaora had found, showing the location of the stone deep within the council's chambers. We'll need to be careful, he said. The council won't let us get anywhere near the stone, and if they find out what we're planning, they'll send us to the valley. Shh, Adaora finished for him. But if we succeed, we'll free Oju from the curse. We'll give it a chance to rebuild, to be something real. They spent the rest of the night in the library, mapping out their plan. When dawn broke, they slipped out of the council's chambers, blending into the crowds as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Obina's 30th birthday was just days away, and he would spend them defying a rule that had held his people captive for generations. As they parted ways in the early morning light, Obina felt a spark of hope. They had the truth now, and they had a plan. And together, he and Adaora would free Oju, or they would die trying.